preparations has mushroomed into a $200 billion industry, with PR flags in the United States now outnumbering journalists. Propaganda has become the primary means by which the wealthy communicate with the rest of society. Whether selling a product, a political candidate, a law, or a law, selling to the powerful delivering messages to the public before consulting their parents in the relations industry. Korea Power presents indictments for the case. He didn't choose a seasoned diplomat for the position of Undersecretary of State. Instead, he chose short views, known in PR circles as the Queen of Nationality. Her resume includes successful advertising campaigns for Head and Shoulders Dental Shampoo,
Wow.
Uncle Ben's Rice,
Wow.
and now Uncle Sam.
You see a news show, watch 60 Minutes, a Fox program, or whatever it is, you tend to give more credibility to what you're told as journalism. If an advertisement comes on, hopefully you tend to be more skeptical of that, because obviously somebody's put an awful lot of money into frankly this idea and journalism. But what you find with another system is that the news story you do is also crafted by the company, given to the TV station or network with the understanding that they would put their own logos on it, identify it as real journalism, and air it.
Colonel Sam Barton would eventually chart 50 false news stories created and leaked by the Bush White House propaganda apparatus prior to and during the assault on Iraq. Foremost amongst these were the lies that led to the war in the first place. It was not bad intelligence that led to the invasion, concludes Gardner. It was an orchestrated effort that began before the war and was meticulously planned to manipulate the public.
In 2002, when the Bush administration was conducting its massive public relations campaign to sell the war, out of Donald Rumsfeld's office in the Pentagon, there was something now referred to as the Pentagon Pundits Program, where literally scores of former high-ranking military generals and admirals were getting their talking points for their appearances on TV news shows directly from the Pentagon. They would literally go to the Pentagon, be in phone conferences with the Pentagon, travel with the Pentagon, and then go on TV as supposedly independent sources. Although most of them were actually being paid in the private sector because these were retired military officials, private defense contractors. Many of them were actually registered lobbyists for military contractors. So there's a bit of a conflict of interest right away when you're judging everything based on being able to sell and some bombs and missiles, and you're supposed to be just a patriotic external giving an honest opinion of what's going on. And even though that's illegal, there's no way to really stop it. And the most powerful medium to which it occurred refuses to even report on the standard. You've got just a massive problem. And that's where we're at.
There were clear warning signs long before the age of the internet. During the assault on Serbia under President Clinton, a reporting published by the Dutch journalist iiWii revealed the presence of cyberwars working with Syria. They derived from the 3rd Psychological Operations Battalion at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. DeVries quoted Major Thomas Collins of the U.S. Army Information Service. PSYOPs personnel, soldiers, and officers have been working in CIA's headquarters in Atlanta throughout February, training the industry. They help in the production of news. What made the Iraq War different were not so much the tactics or even the skill, but the high-tech synergy. It was almost impossible to tell where the state ended and before the state began.
One of the things that we don't want to do is to destroy the infrastructure of Iraq, because in a few days we're going to own it.
Should they have used more? Should they, use Moab, the mother of all bombs, and do daisy cutters, and, let's not just stop at a couple of cruisers.
The invasion of Iraq represents a pinnacle of domestic cyber in the United States, an unparalleled integration between public relations firms, corporate media, and military science. At the time of the assault, large segments of the American public were convinced that a nuclear attack by Saddam Hussein on their nation was not only possible, but imminent. Soldiers who comprised the invading force were similarly confused, with a remarkable 77% believing that Hussein was responsible for the attacks upon Iran. Many earnestly believed that the mission was to destroy a mysterious group known as Al-Qaeda, while bringing freedom to Iraq. Yet what was actually happening was what the Nuremberg Charter describes as the single greatest crime under international law: the planning, preparation, initiation, or waging of a war of aggression. Seven years later, the results of the invasion
Just
were
give me the
clear.
word and I'll make it happen.
According to the Lancet, one of Britain's most respected medical journals, approximately 600,000 Iraqis have been killed from the invasion as of 2006. By 2009, a polling agency quickly reported for 1 million. 4 million Iraqis have been made refugees in their own country. Their entire society is shocked. How did the land of the free and the home of the brave arrive at a place where citizens could be manipulated with such efficiency and on such a massive scale? Our story begins in an unlikely place, a coal mine. When we think of public relations, this is not an image that springs to mind. Yet it was here, at the turn of the century, in the town of Ludlow, Colorado, that PR as we know it began to take shape. From the beginning, it was steeped in class warfare.
The conditions that men, women, and children worked under in 19th century America were very much like what we think of now as the conditions in the global South, in which 13, 14-hour days were not uncommon. Living conditions were often in barrack-like housing. Children worked right alongside their parents. Those were the kind of conditions, and certainly if you picture what we see in the global South today, almost slave-like conditions, you can make the comparison pretty easily.
Like workers in most other industries at the time, the coal miners in the town of Ludlow were organizing to win basic rights. In 1914, the United Mine Workers Union called for coal companies to grant safe working conditions, tolerable wages, and compliance with state mining laws. In response, a labor organizer at Ludlow was shot to death by gunmen working for the Colorado Coal Mining Corporation, or LME, at the Rockefeller plant. Then as now, the Rockefellers were synonymous with wealth and power. William iiWii Rockefeller had made a living as a literal snowmobile salesman, but his son, John Davidson, had achieved the American dream. His fortune was built by exploiting oil reserves in Mexico and the United States. John Davidson Rockefeller was America's first billionaire, but it was his son, John D. Jr., who would define the Rockefeller legacy in the 20th century. 24 hours after striking workers and their families celebrated Easter, the end came. It became known as the Ludlow Massacre.
The strike went on from the fall of 1913 to the spring of 1914, and they still couldn't break the strike. The strikers were living in tent colonies set up by their union, the United Mine Workers. And in April of 1914, the National Guard, which at this time was being paid by the Rockefeller National Guard, attacked the tent colony. Men, women, and children killed many people, set the tents afire. They found the next day bodies of 11 children and 2 women who were burned suffocated to death in that fire. That was called the Red Lovelace.
A brief glance at events prior to Ludlow reveals that the brutalization of workers in the United States was not an unusual occurrence. 60 years earlier, in 1847, a nationwide general strike was met with violent oppression by federal troops. Over 30 workers were killed and 100 wounded at the Battle of the Leg in Chicago. In 1894, federal troops killed 31 American workers, also in the Chicago area. The troops were attempting to break the strike, led by Eugene Debs against the Pullman Company. In 1897, 19 unarmed coal miners were killed and 46 injured when a posse organized by a sheriff from Lyon, Pennsylvania. Most of the miners were shot in the back while attempting to flee. The worldview of the great capitalists at the turn of the century can be summed up in the words of William Vanderbilt. In response to a suggestion that the New York Central Railroad should adjust its train schedules to accommodate the public, he replied, "The public be damned." But the relationship between the public and corporations is changing. Decades of organizing and rebellion have given rise to a vast network of labor groups with increasing political power. Over time, these include the Progressive Party, the Socialist Party, the Green Workers, the Populists, and Progressives, and perhaps most significantly, the Anarchist Union, known as the Industrial Workers of the World, or the Radicals. Following the massacre of iiWii, Soviet Union refused to participate in further attacks against the workers, declaring that they would not engage in the shooting of women and children. Demonstrations erupted across the country. A march occurred in front of the Rockefeller offices in New York City. A clergyman protested outside a church where Rockefeller wanted to give sermons, only to be beaten by police. In modern parlance, it was a PR nightmare.
iiWii went to work for, among other clients, the Rockefellers. The Rockefeller family, after the Ludlow massacre, used iiWii to manage the public perception around that event and other events. iiWii's specialty was crisis management. Among other things, he's credited with inventing the press release, which, all of us just sort of think of as something helpful. You want to publicize an event, a church picnic, call a news conference, you put out a press release. But at the time, the idea was very radical because what iiWii was saying is, well, we're going to manage this crisis by calling attention to it. We're going to actually assist and help the news media and journalists in covering it. What he knew was that the degree to which journalists became used to and dependent on his services was the degree to which he could actually cultivate and cover it.
And bro, you said that you every day, bro. I want a couple of y'all fine, bro. Y'all continue playing like y'all play. I don't play like that.
Or by an overthrown star. He circulated stories suggesting that Mother Jones, in addition to being a legal organizer, was a madam who ran a government. Close wrote letters to the governor and to President Nixon. These techniques achieved little success, in part because he himself had become a highly visible figure. In future, PR experts would learn that their techniques are rarely effective when it's practiced in the dark. Yet one of these innovations is epoch-making. Upon learning that the Rockefeller Foundation had $100 million set aside for promotional purposes, he convinced Rockefeller to donate large sums to colleges, hospitals, churches, and charitable organizations in order to generate positive publicity. He also suggested that Rockefeller Sr. begin handing out money in public, and that Jr. appear in staged photo ops at work sites. What iiWii understood was that the corporation needed enablement. widely perceived as great tyrannical institutions, corporations needed to manufacture an image of freedom and care.
This is the beginning of the public relations industry. Rockefeller didn't set up the Rockefeller Foundation until Rockefeller became very unpopular because of his labor policy. And suddenly Rockefeller needed to create a good impression.
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon that the poor actually get a larger percentage of their income than the rich. I think the rich feel they're doing more because, giving $100,000 seems a substantial donation, and it doesn't matter if they have 100 million, they still think, well, they've done quite a lot. So it's partly a result of this distortion of economic values, and that's partly a result of being cheap. I mean, people don't want to give away their wealth, Ted Turner said, because they're afraid their status in the Forbes 400 is going to go down that little bit. So they give it away when it's prudent or when it's beneficial, when they can get some displayed benefit out of it, or when it can give them access to a different sort of social class or a different group that they want to be part of. But they have a more functional view of their wealth rather than a strictly charitable view.
Charity, private charity, and that's a government charity. Any kind of action that relieves people's distress a little bit without changing the system, maintains the system. In fact, that is the way the American system, which is very exploitative and very unfair. That's the way the American system is being maintained for all these centuries, really, by giving people a little bit and giving enough people, just enough, to prevent them from making a little bit.
Today, one of the largest PR firms in the world specializes in the art of crisis management. Burson Marsteller holds offices in 35 countries and has served clients of various cigarette label companies, chemical giant Union Carbide, and the Monsanto Corporation, a company specializing in genetic engineering and chemical sciences. Like the Renton Group, Burson Marsteller is bipartisan to the core. Its worldwide president and chief executive, Mark Penn, served as Hillary Clinton's key political advisor during the 2008 election. The most disturbing facet of Burson Marsteller is its willingness to record the world's worst human rights violators. Their NPR for the Indonesian government has committed genocide in its team. They work closely with the Nigerian government and run a Dutch shell during and after the biofilm war in Nigeria. And they help to improve the image of a U.S.-backed Argentine military junta led by General Jorge Videla.
One of their clients in the 1970s was the brutal Argentine junta, which had taken control of the government there and was rounding up dissidents, systematically torturing, beating, killing people, and flying out over the ocean and dumping bodies. Not a really good public image. So the Burson Marsteller firm was used by Argentina, hired by Argentina, and went to work for them quite happily under a FAB contract to improve the image of Argentina in the international financial community and in the Western press.
In some ways, it should not be surprising that public relations has evolved into companies like Burson Marsteller and Renton. Looking back at the career of its first owner, we find a remarkably similar pattern.
iiWii went to work for the IG Farben company, a German industrial company, and we know now that IG Farben was actually part of the Nazi propaganda inner circle. One of the most effective and, of course, horrifying government propaganda campaigns ever organized was the Nazi campaign that continued for years and years under the direction of Nazi propaganda administrator Joseph Goebbels. And IG Farben paid iiWii and also paid iiWii's son to represent not just their interests, the interests of Nazi Germany in an effort to paint the Nazi regime as being a friendly regime.
But before lending his expertise to the Third Reich, he stated he would do so for the American government. Along with other experts in the burgeoning field of mind science and public relations, he would engineer propaganda for World War I, not just against the enemy, the Germans, but against the American people themselves.
We often talk about propaganda being relatively recent, but of course it isn't. Even in ancient societies that weren't democratic, especially large states, it was understood by elites that if you don't have the support of the people, you could be in trouble. And so a fair bit of attention was actually given to legitimizing military intervention. I'm remembering here a passage from the War China I think it's kind of favorite, so it would be about 20 years ago, where the author of the book says, in general, and I'm quoting now, in general, war is a thing that the people despise. Therefore, when a young man is to be sent off to war, his wife, his parents, gather around him and say, conquer, or let me never see you again. And this is a very powerful sense of, well, first of all, the violence done to that young man, but also of the sense that war is disgusting to most people. And it is often monumental, and therefore one needs all kinds of songs and dances. In this case, threatening the young man's sexual dispossession. You can't return to your family, you can't return home. You'll be disgraced, honor, security, everything is being played upon you. And it continues. So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times. To swindle people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding in society.
Propaganda and persuasion have been around for centuries, yes, but propaganda in its modern sense can be traced to the 15th and 16th century, when the Catholic Church was in a tough competition with the Protestants over how to articulate the religious vision for the world. The reason that I mention this is that it shows that propaganda is about mindset, it's about ideology, it's about worldview, how people see things, as distinct from an individual policy or whether you happen to like this community. So that's where the word comes from, for propagating the faith. And that's the way the word was used up until the early 20th century. And then what emerged, particularly with World War, was the application of this propagating the faith to refer to international affairs, to refer to what a national government would do, a national security policy. In the run-up to World War I and during World War I, what one saw in the geopolitical stage was a crisis of empires. Empires were disintegrating and falling apart. The British Empire seemed to be extremely strong at that time, and was in a downward phase. It couldn't afford to support its own army, for example. Same with the French, same with the Austro-Hungarians, same with the Russians, the Tsarist Empire, same with the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and so on around the world. When that war was underway, most particularly the United Kingdom came off with an office whose specific purpose was promoting war aims of the United Kingdom.
through publicity, different operations, played doing tricks, through telling the truth, through a whole number of different applications of information, using information as an instrument of and from the beginning.
Woodrow Wilson came to office in 1960 with the slogan, "Peace without victory." What we want is an end to World War I. The other side deserves our support, and the population did want that. In America, 1916 was an election year. The war was the dominant issue. The election campaigns of the parties crystallized the sway of opinion. Neutralism, and a profound wish to stay out of the war, still possessed a doughty champion in the president. Support for Wilson's policy was strong in the Middle West and Pacific states. Europe's war seemed more remote there along the Atlantic seaboard. At the Democratic Convention, Wilson was re-nominated presidential candidate. The chairman opened his speech with a text from the Sermon on the Mount. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God."
It was a plain Wilson proposition, a vast enterprise and salesmanship, the world's greatest adventure in advertising. 75,000 civil leaders, known as were assembled to develop 41 messages to people in churches, theaters, and synagogues. Periodicals were sent to 6,000 One stands for copies of President Wilson's addresses and sold it as a parent. It was, in short, the largest military propaganda campaign in the history of the United States. Several derivative propaganda, the two ways of propaganda, were one is an imminent danger from the savage, bloodthirsty foreign. Two, it was a great propaganda as the message was to make the world safe for democracy. The first thing was a time-limit campaign, one used in the United States to recognize the very powerful indigenous peoples and slaves. During the Great War, the savage Indian and the subhuman Negro were transformed into the barbarian man. The caricature of the bloodthirsty hunter was bolstered by a series of fake news reports leaked by the new propaganda industry and disseminated to the public. Meanwhile, the babies in Belgium with Helper Heinz Company were being impaled on bayonets in a bloody case now to endure. In Canadian, the big crucified the German soldiers. And their dead bodies were being boiled down in so-called corpse factories to be used for ammunitions and pig food. In a foreshadowing of the Freedom Fries incident, sauerkraut was renamed to Liberty Cabbage. False atrocity stories would become a staple for nations in wartime throughout the 20th century. The recent example occurred prior to the First World War.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come to the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
As it turns out, the massacre of babes never occurred. The young girl was actually a member of the Kuwaiti royal family. and had been coached by the public relations firm to give persuasive false testimony.
Kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
The attempt to engender hatred against Germans in support of the war effort was highly successful. But there was another, equally important aspect of the domestic propaganda campaign. If every adventure story needs a villain, it also needs a hero.
This is a song I made about when he was driving the mill. Uncle Sam said he traveled east and traveled west. Uncle Sam said he believed he knew the best. Uncle Sam said, Uncle Sam said, Uncle Sam said, you got to go love and go. I'll travel the east, travel the west.
Creel estimated that 72 million copies of 30 different booklets about American ideals were sent across the United States, with millions more sent abroad. In addition to influencing the minds of Europeans, the goal was to redefine for the home population the very concept of what it meant to be American. The new American would not interpret events from what Creel called a class or sectional standpoint, but rather as a unified collective. In this manner, the people could be herded into one white-hot mass instinct. Previously, military action by the United States had been justified under the pretense of maintaining order, protecting American interests, and bringing civilization to the savages. Now, the word civilization had transmuted into democracy.
Marshall McLuhan, the Canadian communications theorist, once said that if a fish could talk, and you could ask a fish, what's the most obvious element of your environment, the last thing that the fish would say would be water. That's the last thing the fish would notice. And it's true about any culture. Those things that are most powerful and most obvious to an outsider don't get seen by the people swimming in their water. Americans as God's chosen people. This goes back as far as back to 1630, where John Winthrop on the Arabella, coming from England to the United States, said we're a city on a hill. It's not an accident that in the campaign, debates and stumps of the recent candidates, yet Barack Obama actually said that we are a city on a hill, as well as Sarah Palin. Ronald Reagan said it in his inaugural address.
I've spoken of a shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city, built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace.
We're a city on a hill. And so our mission is to democratize the rest of the world. We've got the best system possible. And basically people ought to pay attention to us, because we know.
The idea of a particular state cast as savior of the world would be taken to new heights in the United States. But it wasn't an American invention. The savior motif was used as a justification for virtually every imperial intervention during the colonial era. French leaders spoke of a civilizing mission in their new colonies. British leaders spoke of bringing progress and civilized government to India. Imperial Japan spoke of unleashing an earthly paradise in Asia, while the Third Reich dreamt of a worldwide utopia. A decade before World War I, Mark Twain stated that my kind of loyalty was loyalty to one's country, not to its institutions or its office holders. Decades later, George Orwell came to a similar conclusion, that patriotism is a devotion to a certain place and people, contrary to nationalism, which is inseparable from lust for power. This concept of patriotism remains elusive.
Once the war against Saddam begins, we expect every American to support our military, and if they can't do that, to shut up.
Equating super patriotism with militarism, military endeavor, military achievements, military struggles and victories, that's all supposedly a special manifestation of patriotism. And I argue that a real patriot wants something different for his country. He wants social justice. He wants peace and stability. He wants fairness. He wants an end to racism, sexism. He takes pride in his country's ability at social betterment rather than his country's ability to invade and knock around other countries. A real patriot feels an attachment to his country, but not at the expense of the country. And the citizen feels a special attachment to the history of his own country. He values the accomplishments of his country, like the abolition of slavery, emergence of collective bargaining, and the rights of working people for a better life, the gains made by women in terms of
In October 2019, George W. Bush signed into law what civil libertarians characterized as an all-out assault against the Bill of Rights. It was called the Patriot Act. During the Great War, similar bills were passed. The Espionage Act of 1917 and the Sedition Act, passed a year later, authorized huge fines and lengthy prison terms for anyone who obstructed the military draft or encouraged folks termed disloyalty to the state. The sweeping legislation was quickly put into effect. And first on the list were the Wobblies.
In many ways, the Wobblies were the most impressive example of a union movement in the history of the U.S. working class. Wobblies was the nickname for an organization called the Industrial Workers of the World, iiWW, which flourished in the first decade and a half of the 20th century. The American Federation of Labor, which was the main craft union of this thing, which was organized African Americans, immigrants, and women workers. So that meant excluding the rest of the working class from the movement. Along came the Wobblies, and they set out from the beginning specifically to organize immigrants, women, African Americans alongside white workers in what they called one-based union. They led some of the most successful strikes. One of their strikes was the first sit-down strike at the time. Women workers played leadership roles, something that was absolutely unheard of at the time. Their philosophy was,
As long as I'm alive, my mama can never die, because she's going to always be the one that really needs to have a heart.
Federated, decentralized system of free associations, incorporating economic as well as social institutions, would be what I refer to as anarcho-syndicalism. It seems to me that it is the appropriate form of social organization for an advanced technological society in which human beings do not have to be forced into the position of tools or cogs in a machine.
My dad was nothing but a donator to this creator who
On
created
September
me.
5th, 1917, federal agents raided offices of the Wobblies across the nation, leading to arrests for the offense of causing insubordination, disloyalty, and refusal of duty in the military and naval forces. 101 of the defendants were found guilty and received prison sentences up to 20 years.
This is the queen to all that is created. A man is nothing but a donation to this creator. So why do you get on your knees and say, our Father who art in heaven, when heaven is the woman, heaven
It constrains
you.
expression.
threw lots of people in jail and expelled lots of people from the country.
The conscious thinking human as a baby born here, an
The
empty
Internet
bag
as a
waiting for the
precedence for
truth.
radicalism soon spread to every corner of American society. Patriots were encouraged to inform their friends and neighbors who spoke out against the war, while surveillance increased dramatically, not only by the military, but by seemingly benign institutions like the postal system.
The state flourishes in time of war. The state goes stronger in time of war. The state accumulates power. The military is enhanced.
Ask
The
yourself the
forces
question,
of repression
is
are
believing
enhanced.
better than knowing?
War is an opportunity for the government to grow in power.
By the time the war ended, the total number of deaths had reached approximately 9.7 million soldiers, with millions more suffering life-changing injuries and severe post-traumatic stress. To what end was not clear. The massive
So I don't know how you can believe in the
safe
bullshit that you
democracy,
believe in and not
when it
believe
had
in
to,
what I'm telling
has
you.
produced enormous fortunes for a handful of corporations and banks, while leaving the worldwide labor movement in disarray. If the Great War had been a test of the Constitution, and the concept of balancing the powers by
I
each
just want you to know the truth for you,
the United
so
States
you can
Supreme
be
Court
empowered
established
with
in Chile
knowing that
versus United
all
States
there
and
is
Abrams
to
versus
be
United States
is
that
in
the
you.
federal government could suspend constitutional rights when a nation faced, quote, a clear and present danger. Randolph Bourne, speaking of the Great War as a whole, responded preemptively with a now famous dictum.
The love
Bourne said,
unconditional the
is the
feeling
hell
is
of
in
the
you
state.
as the truth come out of you as the straight and one way to feel love from the heart. It's real.
The definition of polyarchy that we have in the social sciences is a system where the participation of masses of people is limited to voting among one or another representatives of the elite in periodic elections. And in between elections, the masses are not expected to keep quiet, to go back to life as usual, while the elite make the decisions and run the world until they can choose between one or another elite and then for years later. So really, polyarchy is a system of elite rule, which is a little more soft rule than the type of elite rule that we would see under a military dictatorship, for instance. But what we see is that under polyarchy, the basic socioeconomic system will not change. It does not become democratized. Wealth is not redistributed downward. You'll see more equitable redistribution of wealth and resources. So that's the key. Socioeconomic dictatorship and free elections. That's the prescription for polyarchy. Participatory democracy would see not only more participation of people in the running of daily affairs, but would see a democratization of economy, democratization of social relations.
In the 20th century, you can't really talk openly about rule by the rich as the Democrats. The devices that have been developed, propaganda devices, are ruled by the more competent, the technocratic elite, the responsible people, the educated circles. There's a huge literature on this, but maybe the primary source for the 20th century is the leading public intellectual of the 20th century in the United States, Walter Lippmann, a respected commentator on public affairs, also a theorist of democracy.
During the people who later emerged as sort of the founding fathers of modern communication research and communication applications, mass media applications, quite a number of them had worked as propagandists during World War I, often as relatively young people who were shaping their own ideas at the time. And one of them was Walter Lippmann. Lippmann has emerged really to this day as a leading intellectual light, a particular way of looking at society.
Today, Walter Lippmann is known as the Dean of American Journalism. Yet during the Great War, he had been chief lead writer and editor of the U.S. Propaganda Unit. He also served as secretary of the Inquiry, a quasi-intelligence agency. Before dealing with Lippmann's contributions to political theory, we first have to understand the forms of democracy that have characterized the United States and other Western nations since the age of the Great Revolutions. Only clearly, in the age of monarchy, the new nation states would nevertheless preserve the concept but won't be
You
able
just
to
know
right to rule over
what
the
you
mercy
say when
of
it
the
come
nation.
out your mouth.
Well, it's going to be
But
a
you
pleasure
don't
good
know the
coming
truth
forward in time
about what it is.
to see how wonderful things have turned out. But I wish I could take you back in time, back those 200 years when we were starting as a nation. I wish you could have seen this country then.
The divine creator was always on your mind. Will never make you do nothing without your free will.
George Washington was a slave, James Madison was a slave, Thomas Jefferson was a slave. Importantly, Jefferson was democratic a lot, wasn't ethical enough. He was ambassador to France. He picked up a lot of American ideas from the French Revolution, which didn't have any good with people.
I love you more than you love you.
The
Because I
initial
know the truth is
divide
right.
in American
We
politics
was taught to be stupid by people who believe it. But the time
Jefferson
you let
and
go of the
Democrats
you
against
start believing in the
Federalists.
truth.
He was still by birth was essentially a class struggle. Jefferson was in fact a fairly radical democratic thinker in his time. And clearly the Declaration's statement that the world is free to be self-evident that all men are created equal and God
The truth being the creator.
powerful democratic statement. And although Jefferson would not have applied it to women or the Indians or the working blacks, in fact, spaces those workers back to the service of those pushing civil rights and civil liberties forward in the United States from where Jefferson stayed. The problem with the Declaration of Independence was that once independence was formed,
Stopping to think. To not believe in nothing. But
then
be
immediately into the
independent to the
Constitution
no.
of 1787 were a series of uprisings by debtors, essentially, not just in Massachusetts, but most famously the first BulShiT rebellion in 1786.
American state was founded largely with the Ohio Valley, largely forced the operation. American view, that is the Constitution, organized time and money in order to accomplish the way but to do that, slave masters are not going to do it. They would hire poor people. And they don't pay the poor people. They didn't pay them slaves. And the ships that Sanderson and Johnson in 1787 goes to the ports and shuts down the ports. The ports for the beginning foreclose. Then the shades and the other veterans from the
Better riots were happening throughout the 1780s, and they were sufficiently scary from the point of view of people with property that they had to do something about it. And what they did about it essentially was defer the Articles of Confederation and instill a much stronger, much more able government to protect property interests that were a vital threat from the people. This was an elitist, you could almost say coup d'etat, except there wasn't any strong central government that wanted a coup.
We all live in a
So
certain
we
way
were
of life.
trying to set one up and protect it against.
My mom was already practicing service.
Especially economic interests, especially property interests, especially
She didn't need that
people
great.
who didn't have much. First thing they did when they got to Philadelphia in 1787 was they locked the doors. And the only reason we know what happened behind those closed doors was that people like James Madison kept extensive notes.
The American Constitution was formulated primarily by James Madison. He's the major framer of the Constitution, and he wanted to overcome what he called the tyranny of majority. So the primary goal of government is to ensure that the opulent are protected from the majority. So therefore he designed the Constitution in such a way that, as he put it, the wealth of the nation will be in charge. The more responsible set of men, those who sympathize with property owners and their rights. And the system was designed that way. Power was in the Senate, which was the least representative body under the rest of the wealth of the nation, it still is. Our House of Representatives, which is more democratic, was given much less power. The powerful executive was also supposed to represent the wealth of the nation.
She never left.
Madison's
We all in a
defense,
circle
one
of
should
right.
say that he was
It's
really
gonna continue going around and around and around and around.
assumed that the wealthy would be what he called benevolent gentlemen who would not be concerned with their own interests, but with the benefit of the
All
people.
that matters is
Adam Smith, who preceded him,
like
was much more
good
realistic.
or bad in a circle of right,
Pointed out
it's coming back to you in this life or in the next.
They ensure that the policies are designed so that their own interests are protected, no matter how grievous the effect on others, including the people. And it's rather interesting to compare Madison's thinking, which founded this country, with the first major book on politics, namely Aristotle's Politics. Aristotle surveyed many kinds of systems and decided that all of them, if not any of them, would say, all of them, democracy is probably bad. But he said that democracy has a problem. And it was the same problem that Madison had 2 centuries later. He said if in Athens, owing to the majority of the property rich insisted to be divided, and he also felt that was unfair. But Madison and Aristotle had opposite solutions. Madison's solution was to restrict democracy. Aristotle's solution was to restrict inequality.
Opponents of the new government were called anti-federalists, though the term is inaccurate. The majority favored some form of federation, but insisted on more localized control, with a more participatory democratic system.
In the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, they were the price the Federalists had to pay in ratifying conventions to pass the document. So, the democratic element
Fort Knox is stacked with gold. Why? Why is gold so important? Why gold?
Even with the Bill of Rights, we have systems which, try to be perfect and trying to be a civil rights and civil liberties, let's put it mildly, it tramples all over the rights of citizens. So the Bill of Rights is hardly an ironclad set of guarantees for civil rights and civil liberties. So I hate to think of the United States without the anti-federalists were significantly more partial to democratic elements in the society to the rights of ordinary people than would be significantly more believed.
If the greatest legacy of the anti-federalists was the Bill of Rights, their dream of direct democracy was not to be. At the time, many dissidents made predictions for what they believed would come to pass as the new nation began to flourish. The natural course of power is to make the many slaves to the few, one anti-federalist wrote. Another objective to the new government because the bulk of the people can't help but disabled it. The government is the government of the people. The men of fortune would not feel the economy. An aristocratic tyranny in which the group was struggled for power, honor, and wealth before becoming prey to violence, insults, and oppression. In short, my fellow citizens, it can be said to be nothing less than the best to strive to universe of empire. A significant model for both the Federalists and anti-Federalists were the Americans, who had created a highly sophisticated and democratic federation of self-governing units. In stark contrast to European forms of government, the Iroquois people had the ability to immediately remove corrupt leaders. Women played a significant role in decision-making. Everyone was permitted to participate in debate and policy formulation.
Native
Americans were exceedingly democratic in the way they governed. No society was perfect. Make comparisons, you see. Sometimes small, but sometimes 50,000 people and more in a large companies that operated on a basis of mutual respect. Mutual respect was developed out of experience. If you didn't treat people equally, then they were going to give you trouble. Societies were exceedingly collaborative, but they were also exceedingly individual. The individual was honored, but the values were collaborative because you had to get along. Everybody was included in the system they had. Elders obviously were honored. They knew that. You listen to your elders, but everybody also. You have an extremely participatory society, and as it moved up to larger, greater decentralization. So if you had a large number of people, they would be in a federation. The village would decide, the tribe would then decide, but the individual villages would decide. Then the tribes in the federation, their representatives would be. But they would decide for everyone. They'd have to have a consensus of the people. So if there wasn't consensus already, they would have to go back and discuss it. So that to the extent that there was representation, these were representatives who were truly representative. They would have to go back. They would keep their positions unless they could talk with people. And they knew that. Even if they had the authority to make a decision, people would go elsewhere and not keep them as leaders when they didn't listen to them. And they didn't treat them. By and large, you had a participatory society, and even on the larger, more representative level, the representatives really have to listen to the decision.
Ironically referred to as primitive and savage, Native Americans had actually created a far more democratic system of self-governance than any civilized nation in history. But their anarchic models, as well as the more limited democratic systems proposed by the anti-federalists, are incompatible with Madison's elitist vision. In a republic and parliamentary democracy alike, citizens would be reduced to passive observers. They would be allowed to pick and choose which individual would make decisions on their behalf, but they would not be able to make those decisions themselves. Returning to the period after the First World War, we find widespread support amongst intellectuals for Madison's elitist interpretation of democracy. According to Walter Lippmann, the public's function in politics was to be interested spectators of action, but not participants. Yet Lippmann perceived a problem. New technologies in communication and transportation had awakened millions of disenfranchised people to a new world outside their towns and cities, while traditional economic, political, and social structures remained in place. Something had to change. But rather than advocate structural changes in society's institutions, Lippmann suggested that propaganda readjust the public mind.
His essays on democracy